something.
Social media?
Something. I don't know what I forgot, but I forgot something. I guess I'll find out what I forgot as we get into the show.
Yeah, you should probably whisper about it, though, when you figure it out.
I know, maybe I will.
Okay.
About it, okay.
Should we do the whole show in whisper? Some ASMR people might really appreciate it.
No.
Okay, just checking.
Disclaimer.
3, 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 638, recorded on Wednesday, September 27th, 2017. You are the 17%. Hey everyone, I am Dr. Kiki, and tonight on This Week in Science, we are going to fill your heads with jellyfish brains, Neanderthal adolescence, and Virgo teamwork. But first,
Disclaimer. We live in interesting times. Too interesting in some ways. It's nothing like the old days. The good old boring days. Back before the smartphone, before the internet, before television, radio, and the printing press. Back before the pulley, the lever, and the invention of the wheel. Back further still, before the written alphabet, before the domestication of animals, before socks, because I'm pretty sure socks predate all of those other inventions. I'm talking about way, way back. Early man sitting gathered together around a fire at the entrance of a cave. Some pondering the images within the flickering shadows at the back of the cave wall. Others carefully gauging the distance at which feet can be held from the fire to give warmth, yet not cook like mammoth steaks. Some speculating about the meaning of the migration of the twinkling lights in the night sky, while others nap away, hoping to make the world's best stone axe in preparation for the next hunt. And while we may think of these evenings of early humans as boring by today's standards, they did hold great promise for the curious-minded. For so much interesting new knowledge was waiting out there for these early humans. Knowledge that we now take for granted in our interesting times, though chances are, if we run the clock of humanity forward, we won't need to go thousands of years into the future, maybe just a few hundred. We may find that the humans of today have much more in common with cavemen gathered round a fire than with the humans of tomorrow. We will look back at our simpler times with a vast landscape of discoveries still ahead of us and say, these humans had it so easy. Why, they even had This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind I can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Science to you, Kiki and Blair.
and good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to yet another episode of This Week in Science. We're back once again to exclaim and proclaim and pull the levers and roll the wheels. I love this internet fire that we have going here. Let's light a fire here, kids. You ready? You ready?
Good.
I'm born ready.
All right, good. All right, everyone, we have some good stories today. I brought stories about Virgo help, brains and neuron chips, and the 17%. Justin, Justin, what do you have?
I've got where bird beaks come from, what to expect when raising a Neanderthal, and the secret life of fingers.
They're right there. How could they be so secret? I see them right there all
right
the
now.
time.
It's when you're not looking. When you're not looking. That's when they're up to things you don't know about.
Okie dokie. And Blair, what is in the animal corner tonight?
I brought animal brains. That's jellies and
pigeons. That's right. Animals that, don't even have a brain. Oh, and also jellyfish. So
Wait a minute.
later.
I'm going to have, next time I see you in person, Blair, don't have brains.
But just wait for the story, Kiki. It's great.
I know. Birds have the best brains,
They
you
do,
guys.
they do. I was being silly because
And
everyone thinks pigeons are
jellyfish are just that big blobs of jello in the sea.
yeah, they're just fluid-filled bags, guys. What
That's
could
right.
they possibly have to say? We'll find out.
Because Blair would not have a story about them unless they had something to say.
That's right. It turns
that
out
works.
jellies are just fluid-filled sacks. Moving on. That was story number 1.
All right, everyone. As we jump into the show, I want to remind you that you can subscribe to our podcast if you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube. We have a podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes, in the Google Play podcast portal, Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, all the places. Look for us. Look for This Week in Science. You will find us. You can also find us on YouTube and Facebook. Search for This Week in Science. Above all, though, you can always go to TWIS.org. But right now, it is time for What Has Science Done for Me Lately? What has it done? Here's a letter of the week. As a technophile, I surround myself with technology news, technology trends, and technology futurism fully on a daily basis. Technology is the real-world application of scientific principles. It is from the work of electrical engineering, the material sciences, quantum mechanics, and many other disciplines working together that we live in this world of connectivity and mobile and cloud computing. The full power of data centers and supercomputers has gone from the ivory tower to my pocket. Science and technology work in a virtuous spiral. Science gives us better technology gives us more precise ways to do better science, and so on. It is for this reason that I look forward to the future. I do so with anticipation for what new discovery is right around the corner. One fan of many, Dale Moore.
Nice.
Yeah, I love the sentence that the science and technology work in a virtuous spiral. It just pulls a wonderful image, and it is so true because we could not have technology without the trials and errors of the scientific method, right?
Mm-hmm.
Observation, hypothesis, testing, results.
And then the technology helps us do better science. See, that's the spiral.
The spiral, exactly. Dale, thank you so much for writing in, and this is definitely something that is important. We couldn't be doing this show. The technology that supports us is thanks to the science and the application of that science. So yes, thank you for that very important reminder, and thank you so much for writing in. Everyone out there, you too can write in and let us know what science has done for you lately. What does it do for you every day? How important is science to your life? We want to know, and we want to share your story with our audience. So please write us. You can leave us a message on our Facebook page. So facebook.com/This Week in Science. Just look for This Week in Science on Facebook if that is too many letters. But we do want to keep filling this part of the show with your stories, with what you have to say, because you really make this show happen, and we couldn't keep doing it without you. Your stories are important, and they are inspiring. And you know who else is inspiring? The 17%. I'm moving into my science story.
What is this 17%?
We're diving in right now. This 17% of which I speak is a percentage based on a Pew Research study survey that was just released this last week. According to a survey on Science News and Information Today, where people get their science news, how they think about all this stuff, it turns out that there are 36% of U.S. adults, American adults, who get science news at least a few times a week, but they don't really go looking for it. They just kind of get it as they're perusing their news feeds or reading newspapers or doing whatever they're doing. Science comes to them. 30% of Americans get science news at some point in time and usually because they're looking for it. So sometimes they're looking for it, sometimes they're not, but they're getting it because they're looking
That's
for it.
a great number.
30%.
Actually, I think that's or at least better than I expected it to be.
Right? But the 17%, 17% of Americans are they are directly engaging in searching for scientific information, reading scientific stories, books, trying to get as much of science and information about science as they can out of the world. 17% of the public are those people in our audience.
Nice.
Our audience is the 17%. Our audience downloads us every week. They are searching for scientific information. They have found a way to get it every week by subscribing to the TWIS podcast and maybe other podcasts. They probably post stories that they have found themselves on social media sites to share with others. Our audience are the directly engaged and interested audience. And I just want to call out for a second how wonderful it is to have the 17% here with us. Thank you for being with us. And now what we want to do is make that number grow.
Yes, please.
I just want to get all 17%.
Yeah, we definitely don't have all 17%, but these are people, these make up our audience. But this number could potentially grow. And the majority of Americans are really not trying too hard to get scientific information in their lives. And as of now, according to this poll, nearly 3/4 of the public, 73%, say that the way the news media cover scientific research it's not a very good job. That the bigger problem with news about science research is the way reporters cover it.
Mm-hmm. Something in your house could kill you this week at 11.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the 43% of American adults say that the big problem when it comes to the reporting of scientific findings is that the news media are too quick to report on findings that may not hold up. They oversimplify scientific research findings. They're too quick to report on disagreement about findings, like the idea of finding bias where there may not actually be any. And they cover too many research findings that are not really important. So the stuff, it is not necessarily health related or other human interest related. And when it comes to the scientists themselves, people say that the science researchers are contributing to the problem because they publish so many studies. It's hard to tell the difference between the high quality and the low quality ones. 27% of Americans say that science researchers overstate their research's implications. Yeah. And then, it's not all on the media and the scientists. The Americans that were surveyed here, which was a very large number, I believe it was around 4,024 adults ages 18 or older within the period of May 30th to June 12th of this year. They say 44%, almost half, say that the public themselves don't know enough about science to understand findings that are reported in the news. And 42% of Americans say that the public jumps to conclusions about how to apply new findings to their own lives. Yeah.
Hey, that's what we're here for.
That's right. We're trying to have these conversations that talk about the many sides of research findings and the questions that might still remain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most people pretty much distrust social media at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
can you blame them?
Yeah. Not really.
And good that they're being skeptical of it because, all of it can be largely unsourced.
Yeah, something that's 33% of Americans say that they regularly get their science news from family and friends who they don't really think necessarily understand the science themselves.
Oh, no.
And even fewer, back to 17% again, 17% talk with others about science news at least weekly. And then far lower than shares found in past surveys focused on talking about news generally or discussion of politics. So a lot of people, they're just like, they're not really talking with a lot of people about science. So you know what? This show should give you water cooler topics.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Cocktail party topics, ways to talk about science, things that are happening in the world that maybe your friends will find interesting as well.
I'm constantly bringing up in conversation a recent study.
Right?
They're
Yes,
like, enough, we get it. If we wanted to hear it, we'd listen to the show.
I'm that friend as well. And before we jump into the political bashing of either political party,
We're gonna do that though?
we're not actually, because
so then it's not before.
Republicans and Democrats are pretty equally divided on being active science news consumers. However, the interesting thing is that Democrats are more likely to think the media do a good job of covering science.
The liberal news bias.
Yes,
So
which could
so
be-
first of all, I wonder where they're getting their news. Like not the 17%, but beyond the 17%. What they're calling science
So-
news, because that to me is a little like
and this is something that I hadn't gotten to yet. It's a great question. The majority of American adults get their science news from general news outlets, newspapers, the big media outlets. They're 54% they regularly get the science news from that source. And
So
they,
I will say-
but they think only 28% of Americans think that the general news sources get the science right. Interestingly, 12% of the public get their science from podcasts or radio programs. Same amount. 28% of Americans think science news from podcasts and radio programs gets it right most of the time.
So getting it right most of the time in science, though, that's a tricky one in terms of reporting.
Yes,
because you're taking a synopsis of a whole study, and there's everything that we end up talking about is, well, why was this a good study? Or here's the problem I have with this study. Here's what I don't like about that. And the speculation aspect, I don't know so much if it's the overstatement by researchers themselves when they speculate in pieces. That usually seems pretty moderated with might, could be further down the road, could open a door to a hallway that turns a corner around it. Like they throw in a lot of those caveats. It's probably more the reporting fault for overstating the value of new news. 3 things in your fridge that you should not eat today, right? That stuff. But I would, because I see that it's such a small percentage of the news feeds as they go by have anything to do with science, although newspapers still usually have a pretty good story, at least weekly, that I can find that's like, wow, that's really great. That's like new news. It seems just sort of like a barren landscape to be choosing from what's actually getting put out there. So,
right. And it's interesting that when we talk about the science that people are getting, when we're talking about news, you expect it's going to be coming from news outlets or science magazines or podcasts like our own. But other science sources of scientific information are places like science centers or museums, and then documentaries, which are not necessarily news oriented. And these places are thought of more highly by the public. 54% and 52%, respectively, of Americans think that science museums and documentaries get the science right most of the time. And science magazines are 47% of Americans think that they get the science right most of the time.
Right. How can you get it like 53% wrong in reporting on a scientific study?
Well, it's not 53. This is the percentage of Americans who think that the news is reported accurately most of the time.
So 53% of Americans just don't believe in science is what we're getting at.
Yeah, they're like, well, I don't get it, so it's probably wrong, or it's fake news, and I don't get it, it's probably wrong.
That's exactly where the science communicator's job is so important, right? Is to be able to explain these studies in a way that feels accessible. And so the explanatory chain of kind of the question to the results are clear and followable so that it seems plausible. Because otherwise, if I just tell you, oh, cockatoos are as smart as a 3-year-old child, you're likely to say, that sounds ridiculous. So and that's why I like to talk about the methodology of these studies so often. And that's why I find that so fascinating, because that really brings the science into an accessible place to a lot of people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And but it's about the accessibility and what stories are the kinds of stories that that people are interested in. And they've also found that the type of stories that are more popular are definitely things that are more human centric. So the stuff that's could be considered quote unquote inside baseball, or things that are just informational, most of the public, they don't really bother, and they're not interested in seeking that kind of thing out.
Right. And what
not
makes
information
it
for information's sake.
Right. And what makes it interesting is the extrapolation.
Right.
Which is where then this becomes a very intense tightrope walk. Because that's part of our job too, is to make the research accessible by talking about potential implications.
And so I've got here from the Pew Research Center, I'm showing a graph, a bar graph of the top science news topics that have the highest level of interest. Health and medicine comes in at the top, with a net of 70% of Americans saying they're interested in it. 28 are most interested, and 43% are kind of interested, not most interested. Food and nutrition comes in second. So these two top ones are just very, what's going to affect my life? Technology, again, application, what's going to affect my life? The fourth, energy and environment, what's going to affect my life? Fifth, the mind and brain. And this is where it starts getting into, this could be like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, what's going to affect my life stuff.
Back to health, right?
But it's also, but the mind and brain is also, who am I? What is humanity? This gets into the more big picture thinking stuff. Space and astronomy comes in after that. And then finally, evolution of humans and animals.
My favorite subject of all is dead last.
Mm-hmm.
But and you could argue that part of this is framing too, right? That if you explain some of these studies from a lens of some of those human-related concerns, it could become more interesting.
So this is what I'm suggesting. We're going to completely change up the show. These are the only topics we're going to report on.
Okay,
this week
from here on out. I lost Blair. She's done. She's like, I can't be a part of the show anymore.
You know what? The animal corner. There's no reason for me to be here.
I know. There's no animals. No animals at all.
Human aspect of things and making. There was this sort of interesting documentary I was watching that it was connecting things, geological events, that sort of thing, with modern day human events and technology in the course of history. One of the little things that I thought was interesting is because these early farmers learned how to plant potatoes in Peru, and they were discovered by the Spanish. They were sent back to Europe, and it became a starter crop for poor Irish farmers. And then a blight happened, so this one family had to move to Michigan, and the child of one of those poor farmers that moved to Michigan watched a steam-powered tractor go by, and that was Henry Ford. Like, what? Like, you can actually tie in kind of any event through the past, a geological event or what have you, and eventually get to how it impacts modern day society, or how it changed your life in some way, or the course of human history. So
I have a story about jellyfish tonight that I guarantee you will have implications on humans.
Yeah, and I just wanted to give this read this one quote.
Can we grind it up and eat it as a supplement? Is that where we're going?
You. Ground up jellyfish brains. No, that is not what we're talking about right now. This quote, end of the article by John Timmer from Ars Technica on this this survey. He says, overall, from this survey from Pew, the picture that emerges is one of a U.S. public that wants to be enthused about science, but doesn't have the time and energy to devote to reading science news, and is frequently disappointed with the results when they do. And while the purveyors of science news receive a lot of blame for this, the public recognizes that hype-driven scientists and the public's own lack of knowledge make the situation worse. Is there an obvious solution? And there is where I will leave the end of this story. And I want everyone to think about that. What would you like? What do you want? How do you see the landscape of scientific communication changing? That'd be wonderful to know.
And now, 3 things in your refrigerator you should definitely not eat.
Yeah, don't eat LIGO or Virgo. We need them.
Oh, yeah, they turn out to be working.
They are working, yes. So what is LIGO? What is Virgo? I keep mentioning Virgo. It's not an astronomical sign as, well, it is, but that's not what I'm talking about right now. LIGO is the gravitational wave detector that there are 2 of them here in the Western Hemisphere, and Virgo is the other, the European cousin or the European twin triplet of the LIGO array. And LIGO on its own, we've got a couple of stories of detecting gravitational waves, right? These gravitational waves, they're able to say, oh, this is the signature of black holes smashing into each other, and a portion of that energy being dispersed into the universe, into the fabric of space-time, and creating waves, the same way as if you threw a rock in a pond, the top of the pond ripples. This is space-time rippling, and these ripples are sent out, and we are in a path because it's going out through all of space-time from the point of origin. We are in that path, and using our interferometers, we can determine how big an impact was, or a combining, what exactly happened. LIGO on its own has suggested that we've seen a couple of black hole mergers that have been big and exciting, but Virgo came online in August, and suddenly we're able to triangulate, where once upon a time, we could only kind of just get a general swath of space where we thought black holes had been merging. Suddenly, we have a triangle. Suddenly, we have a third leg from which to calculate a general location for an event to have occurred in space. And so as a result, we have today, just today, this morning in Italy, researchers from Italy and NSF and LIGO came together and gave a press conference to let everyone know that Virgo worked, and the 3 of these gravitational wave detectors working together have once again detected a black hole merger. It's some billion or so light years away from us, and they have been able to pretty much determine a square area of space, a location in space where this happened. And so this is giving us much more information about the specificity of events happening in the universe around us.
How far away is it?
Like something like a billion. Is it I think it's a billion light years away. It's some distant, very, very far away.
Okay, got it.
That's
And-
okay. That's a
yeah.
safe distance then.
It's a safe distance, yes. And one of the really exciting things also is the use of LIGO and now Virgo to not only be able to triangulate a location in space where things are happening, they can use the intensity, the amplitude of these gravitational waves that they're recording to also figure out, how big of a merger has taken place. And additionally, something that we don't know if this has worked or not, but they're trying to pair the gravitational wave signal with actual light signals from space. And they think that they may have, there is a story because a bunch of telescopes have moved to start looking at the constellation Hydra, because LIGO may have gotten a signal of a black hole merger, and now they're going to look for a light signal to see if it was the merger of neutron stars. So because neutron stars, when they merge, actually give off light in the radio band frequency that can be picked up by our radio telescopes and our light-based telescopes. And so we're going to start not only maybe seeing black hole mergers, but also these other bodies, dense bodies in the universe merging and giving us more information about what's happening where in the universe around us. Yeah, it's very exciting. Very exciting news. And there's a great article that I'll post to over, that's it, from Physics Central, the Physics Buzz blog. No longer will we talk about gravitational waves as humdrum. Not that I ever did. This is This Week in Science. Justin, what you got?
Oh, that's a very good question. I have my first story of the night, which is, where do bird beaks come from?
Eggs.
Answer?
I don't know.
Dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs. Of course he did.
Dinosaurs. Duh. Right? Dinosaurs laid eggs. Dinosaurs, many of them had feathers. We know birds evolved from dinosaurs. One big difference, of course, dinosaurs had lots of teeth. Birds have none. Instead, they have beaks. So how'd that happen? In a new study, Xiao Wang from the Capital Normal University of Beijing and colleagues studied a series of dinosaur and early bird fossils to see the transition. They found that some dinosaurs evolved to lose their teeth. And as they got older, they sprouted a small beak. So it'd be sort of like, okay, you lose your baby teeth and then you get your adult teeth and you lose your adult teeth. And then instead of getting false teeth later stage of life, you would just grow a beak.
But the beak came first, right? I mean, there were dinosaurs with teeth and beaks first, right?
I don't know how that works.
All right.
Over time, this process happened earlier and earlier until eventually the animals emerged from their eggs with a fully formed beak. So there were dinosaurs that perhaps had beaks already, but this is how that transition happened over time. Oldest birds actually had reptilian-like teeth. Archaeopteryx, late Jurassic period, that's 150 million years ago. And then the Siberianus from the early Cretaceous, that's 125 million years ago. But even earlier birds had lost their teeth. Some modern birds all lack teeth. There's one exception, some sort of South American. Huh?
The Hoatzin.
The Hoatzin has a tooth.
Stink bird.
Get out of the egg, picks away at it till it can bust out, and then it sheds it.
It also smells like rotting food. So
Does
the Hoatzin
really?
is a fun bird.
Well, it's because it's a symbiote, isn't it? It smells funny because it's got some bacterial.
They have a weird thing in their gizzard, that makes them smell like rotting food.
Yes.
Fun fact.
Fun fact.
Yeah, but it looks like those. So there's like the area that would grow teeth that they sort of manipulated in some chickens to grow baby chickens with teeth.
Yeah.
And it's that same area that the process of the beak is being formed. Huh. So it's sort of that's the sort of evolutionary trade-off, I guess. You trade teeth for beaks. They looked also more widely across vertebrates that have lost or reduced their teeth as they evolved. This included some fish, frogs, pangolins, whales, and entirely toothless turtles. In all cases, animals that had lost their teeth were associated with replacement of the teeth by a keratin beak. Nature's falsies or false teeth. Nature's
It's interesting
dentures.
that that these theropod dinosaurs, that they would develop this way. I wonder how much. Yeah, I wonder if this is part of the evolutionary pathway or if it was just one weird group of dinosaurs. It's just one odd group that decided, oh, I'm a baby and I'm going to have teeth and I'm going to lose it and I'm going to grow a beak.
Yeah, but it sounded like pretty late in age. Like once the adult teeth had all sort of fallen out. But what if this is just a normal evolutionary transition that just, most lifespans are too short maybe to see it play out? like people finally live to be 300 years old and all start growing beaks.
That's what I was thinking about. I'm like, what if we all lost our teeth as we get older and then just start getting these keratinous beak-like appendix?
300-year-old humans all have beaks.
I mean, if they were full-fledged like duck beaks, I actually think that might be kind of cool. But really, what would happen is your
like
your
the
lips,
duck-billed platypus
your lips
people
would just get kind of hard and crusty, and that would be real gross.
And
well,
that
I
would
think
give
they
a
would just
whole
be the
new
covers.
name.
They'd be back there at the base, and then the beak would grow out.
That would give a whole new meaning to the people who take pictures with their duck face pictures. Keratinous lips. There we go. Oh my goodness. Dinosaurs losing their teeth, getting a beak. Of course, that's how it works. But I'd like to see more of this. Let's find more evidence of these theropod dinosaurs, the lineage that led to the birds having this kind of change.
It's really exciting how much we've discovered just in the short time, since I was in college. It was just yesterday. But we've discovered so much. And I remember all of my evolutionary morphology and fossil-based classes that talked about what we knew. And there are so many things that we know now that I didn't know then that has been discovered. Yeah, that were questioned. It's fascinating. I love it. Can't wait to see what we find next.
And so there were dinosaurs that had both beak and teeth. There were some dinosaurs that had beaks without teeth, but there was dinosaurs that had both. But the ones that had both teeth and beaks had only a little beak. Had like a small. They weren't like big beaked.
Crusty lips, like I was saying.
Crusty lip beak dinosaurs, as they were known back in Blair's college days.
Gross.
I'm glad I didn't know your friends in college. The crusty lip beak dinosaurs. Could be a good band name. And on that note, I think it's time that we move into Blair's Animal Corner.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels.
What you got, Blair?
Oh, we're gonna move way back in time, even before dinosaurs, to our friends, the jellies.
Yeah.
We can call them jellyfish just so we know we're not talking about jam, but they are not fish. They are invertebrates. They lack a brain. They have nerves, but they do not have a centralized nervous system. New research from the California Institute of Technology tells us jellyfish sleep.
Huh.
Yes. So we know, of course, that humans, mice, fish, and all vertebrates sleep.
But jellyfish are vertebrates.
That's right. We've discovered that flies sleep. They are invertebrates. But they have a head, they have a spinal. Well, they don't have a spinal column, but they have a head and they have a nerve clump very similar to a brain. They have bilateral symmetry. They have all these sorts of things. But jellies have none of that. They are just kind of a fluid-filled bag moving through the ocean in response to stigma. So how what? So Paul Sternberg from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute at the California Institute of Technology wanted to see exactly who sleeps. Scientists debate why we sleep. There are lots of theories involving memory, learning, cellular recovery, but Sternberg wanted to take several steps back to just ask, who sleeps? Do all animals sleep? So what he did is he and his graduate student, Ravi Nath, teamed up with friends at Caltech who studied Cassiopeia. These are upside down jellies. And if you've never had a chance to see them, head to your nearest aquarium that has them. Check them out. They are amazing to watch. They are exactly what they sound like. They are jellies that repeatedly push down to the bottom of the water column into the sand so that their tentacles are faced up. That's actually so that they can catch food easier and because they have a photosynthetic symbiote that helps them get their food because they live in very clean and clear tropical waters where there's not a whole lot of food for them to actually grab with their tentacles. So they are upside down like this. They are the perfect jellyfish to study sleep in because their space at rest is up against the ground upside down.
Easier to track them.
Easier to track, easier to provoke. So all other jellies are actually considered plankton because they kind of just move around at the whimsy of the current. But these guys have a very specific space that they like to be. So it's a very easy thing to study when they are where they want to be and how they act when they're not where they want to be. So they went in at night and they videotaped them with their iPhones and recording jellies at night and during the day, manually counting individual pulses of the bell. They got a clue that Cassiopeia might be sleeping. They pulsed less frequently at night. They counted pulses of 23 jellies over 6 consecutive days and nights. They found that pulsing activity decreased considerably at night. And then what's even more interesting is that when they dropped food into the tanks, they woke back up. They went back to their normal pulse amount. And they say, it's like the odor of coffee permeating your consciousness in the morning. So it's something to signal to them to be active. So that wake up is actually a sign that this is something like sleep and not paralysis or coma or anything like that. They're responding to this external stimuli. So they also wanted to check on sleep. I love this, by dropping the floor out from them while they were sleeping. So they placed Cassiopeia inside a PVC pipe with a mesh bottom.
That's like somebody like taking your bed out from underneath you while you're sleeping, right? Like
absolutely. And what would you do?
You jump the sheet off.
Yeah, absolutely. So they put them inside this PVC pipe with a mesh bottom, and then they dipped the pipe into the tank. The jellies would rest, they'd go to sleep, and then the researchers would lower the pipe, forcing the jellies to then they were kind of pushed off the mesh, and they had to go back down to the sand. They don't like that, Sternberg explains. During the day, they would quickly pulse their bells and swim down to rest on the mesh again. At night, it took them 3 times longer to start moving and get back to where they were trying to go. So it's as if they're groggy, which is an anthropomorphization, of course. But really, it is this transitioning from, if you want to call it sleep, to awake time takes a minute. That's what our grogginess is as well, right? We're like amping the brain back up. So this is typical for experimentation with the sleeping animals we've studied before. And like other sleeping animals, this is the best part. When they made the jellies pull an all-nighter, they paid for it the next day. How do you make a jellyfish pull an all-nighter? Well,
keep the lights on.
Close. They pulsed water at the bottom of the Cassiopeias for 6 to 12 hours at night. So they basically just kept them constantly off of the ground. So they kept having to try to push down. So it kept them awake. And they counted the pulses the next day. they were less active. They were still definitely awake. They were not asleep, but they were slower to respond to stimuli, and they were just in general less active. And even more interesting, after they caught up on sleep the next day, they returned to normal. So jellies sleep. It really looks that way. But this, Sternberg says, only brings up more questions. Do you need neurons to sleep? Do you need more than one cell to sleep?
They have neurons. They may not be vertebrates, but they have neurons.
Right. So that's his next question.
Yeah. They have a system.
Does something without neurons also sleep? Does something with only one cell sleep? He wants to study sponges. He wants to study protozoa and find exactly how far back sleep goes. Because this pushes our idea of sleep way farther back on the evolutionary tree than we thought.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm going to bet. I'm not looking at research in front of me right now, so I don't know for sure. But I'm willing to bet that we already know there are circadian rhythms in yeast, bacteria. I'm willing to bet there are studies that show circadian rhythms of changing metabolic activity in these lower life forms. And if so, I think the question is not, it's where do we draw the line to calling it sleep? You know, at what, I mean, are we going to call this a change in metabolic activity?
Right.
Are we going to actually call what the jellyfish are doing sleep?
Right, exactly. And so that is a great question. What now will we define as sleep? And I think that the kind of the thing that they're putting forward through this research is because, how do I put this without making it sound like a jellyfish has a brain? Because their responses adjusted with lack of sleep, and because they were able to make them stay awake, and because they acted groggy when woken, all these sorts of things, this made them characterize it as more than a circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
This made them characterize it as something that that provided a service, which ultimately, again, we don't know what that is.
Right. As we talked about just a week or so ago at the end of the show, there are some cases in which a lack of sleep might actually be good for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's this thing that we spend a third of our life doing that we don't really know why. Which is
now it's crazy, but the experiments that need to happen now, I guess, are let's try and deprive bacteria and yeast of sleep.
Yes, absolutely. What will happen?
This is going to be some great comic book material. I don't know or a joke, a comedian. How do you keep a bacteria awake all night? I don't know.
I put on a binging Netflix show about hospital waiting rooms. I don't know. That's the best I can do. Okay, so that was the jellyfish. Now let's move on to the poor pigeons who I slighted earlier in a joke.
You did slight those very smart pigeons.
Because they're so darn smart. So I wanted to kind of put in stark relief here how most people feel about pigeons, which is that they dumb. They annoying, they dumb, they gross, right?
That's so people don't know pigeons. They haven't taken the time to get to know them.
That's right. And maybe that little bum-legged pigeon actually has a heart of gold. You don't know.
A brain of gold.
Yeah, you're right. See, that's what this study is all about. So Dr. Sarah Letzner from a crazy name of an institution that I will not try to say out loud, which is a technical university in Dresden. We'll just leave it there. Wanted to look at multitasking in humans and in pigeons. Yes. Predictions? What do we think? Multitasking. Justin, are you a good multitasker?
I can eat a hamburger, drive, and react to something that's being said on the radio at the same time.
Oh, excellent. Great. Kiki?
I can run the show, talk with you guys, and play with my cat.
Oh, that's pretty impressive. Well, pigeons might be better at it than you guys.
Oh man, of course they are.
So this study showed that pigeons are capable of switching between two tasks as quickly as humans and more quickly in certain situations. So biopsychologists who had performed the same behavioral experiments testing birds and humans looked at their ability to basically stop one task and start another. So what they did is they had 15 humans and 12 pigeons. So I will say, disclaimer, pretty small sample size. However, it's a pretty interesting experiment. So they had the humans and the pigeons. They had them stop a task in progress and switch over to an alternative task as quickly as possible. The switch over to the alternate task was performed either at the same time the first task was stopped, so they found out they had to stop and start at the exact same time, or it was delayed by 300 milliseconds, a whopping 300 milliseconds. You got in between them telling you to stop and then start the new task. In the first case, that's when real multitasking is happening. At the exact same moment, they ask you to stop what you're doing and start something new. Those being stopped doing the first task and switching over to the alternative task, they slow down by the same amount, pigeons and humans, under double stress. So it's the exact same amount of slowdown cognitively in between the two things. In the second case, switching from the alternative task after a short delay, the processes in your brain actually changes. So it's not the exact same wiring maneuver that happens. The stopping of the first task and the switching over to the second task act more like ping pong. So there's an order of operations in your brain. The nerve cells that control both processes have to send signals back and forth. So they assumed that pigeons would have an advantage over humans because of their brain. And they found, in fact, 250 milliseconds faster reaction time in pigeons than humans. So let me explain about their brains. And Kiki, feel free to jump in because this is totally your wheelhouse. But people would expect that humans, because they have this very special cerebral cortex, this is where a lot of multitasking, complex thought comes from. They have cortical layers, 6 layers in the cerebral cortex, and the structure is thought to be the reason for complex cognitive functions in mammals. Once again, selling birds short, quote unquote, bird brain, because their brain is not like ours.
But it has very analogous structures. It's not set up the same, but they have areas of the brain that work exactly the same.
And in this case, the fact that their brain is smaller might actually work to their advantage because their neurons are more densely packed in their cerebral cortex. They have 6 times as many nerve cells as humans per cubic millimeter of brain. And the distance between those neurons in pigeons is 50% shorter than in humans. Less distance traveled means speed of nerve signals are faster. So that's the expectation that the researchers had. And they found that all in all, it is potentially true. Because either the pigeons reacted as quickly or slightly faster in these multitasking experiments.
So can I say that makes good sense to me, and I think you'd probably find that in something like bats as well, or probably most birds. And I the act of flying.
Bats though do not have. Bats have mammalian brains. They have brains that are like mice and rats. They have or not mice and rats, but I mean they have a mammalian brain. They don't have a bird brain. So they don't necessarily, it's a smaller brain, but it's not structured like birds.
Right. But I'm talking about reaction times. I would bet you that the reaction times are still pretty quick. I bet you because of the act of flying itself, we humans, we think we move quickly. Like, yes, when we're driving, sometimes when we're running or riding a bike, but we're not really moving at that quick a speed. Whereas if you're a bird, you spend a lot of time moving much faster than humans, sometimes around other birds, and have to make really quick decisions while flying, changing direction, tracking the location of the other birds who are also flying in your vicinity. That
You're trying to not get eaten. You're trying to find food. You're trying to find. Yep.
The ability to multitask on the fly while flying.
On the fly.
would I think require a brain that could multitask in a quicker response time. Like that their moments, their frame of reference for time is probably much more needing to be at a quicker pace. So it makes sense the brain would structure itself in such a way as to be able to accommodate that.
And that's an interesting point, is definitely any animal that does all those things. And on top of that, an animal that has to live in an urbanized environment has a lot of stressors.
Yeah, a lot of stressors, but I don't think that's necessarily the issue there. I mean, urbanized environments have not been around long enough to have caused brain changes like the ones that they were looking at. But in this situation,
not the urbanized environment, but more demanding environments can do that.
Yes. But what I was going to say about the brain and what is actually going on in there is that when you are doing something, you are cognitively aware of it. If you're trying to multitask and you're asked to switch between processes, there are a number of subconscious or unconscious processes that are happening below the radar. And those are happening in multiple areas of the brain, and they're talking to each other. And that's all percolating up to your consciousness, which has then potentially top-down control to change the way that you perform on whatever task. Task switching then means that you need those subroutines to all switch on their own, and then your consciousness to generally come around to it and go, yes, we're doing this new thing now. And so in the human brain, there's longer distances, maybe more subtasks that are superseding each other because of the consciousness that we have. We don't know this for sure, but it's very possible that our awareness of our actions actually helps to slow things down. And then additionally, the bird brain being smaller, you've got the areas that are controlling the subtasks being smaller and closer together. And if you don't, and there is a time factor to this that you cannot get past. The amount of time it takes for an action potential to go down a nerve trunk, an axon, a dendrite, to get to wherever it's going, and to then send a chemical signal to change something up. There is a very physical limit to that speed.
Yeah.
So what they're looking at is it's interesting. These different areas, neocortical or pallial structures, and where they are and how they're working. And it's very possible the human brain gets in its own way where that smaller avian brain does not.
Yeah, once again, just because a structure doesn't look like ours, that doesn't make it worse.
Right. I'd still want the comparative study with the bats.
And
I think that would be really interesting.
And I was going to say, Justin, like you were saying, it's very possible. And we don't have to do the advanced acrobatics that these birds do, or that bats have to do to be able to catch their food. So there is, and maybe, it depends on the bird species as well. I mean, who's to say that this pigeon who walks around pecking at bits of whatever it is on the sidewalk in the city is not going to be as fast as, say, a swift or a swallow, who is really on the wing in the catching of their prey.
Right. Absolutely.
And it was something I was watching one of these documentary things where they're looking at chickadees, and they had like some sort of task where you have to, the birds had to figure out how to get food that was hidden behind a little glass enclosure. And chickadees that were from Alaska were like right on it. And ones from the Midwest, like, couldn't figure it out. They were slow as the day is long. And part of the reason
I've met all these birds. Right. I know. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. But part of what the research was indicating is also having a more difficult survival scenario, or having a more difficult over, the generations of birds, that the intelligence, the ability to maybe figure things out was created in that.
In hardship.
And hardship. And I think flight by itself is a type of hardship. If we had to fly everywhere, I mean, look how many humans there are at a mall. If we were all flying, we'd be just with our reaction times, we would definitely be running into each other constantly. I mean, we have to lay out rules and for just driving cars. You stop here. We have a system for getting through an intersection that's going to take way longer than if we just got up and said nobody's there and kept going. No, we don't get to wing it. We have to follow very strict rules in order to avoid running into one another. And these birds are constantly doing it. So my extrapolation bet for this one would be we'd see it throughout all birds, and I think we'd see it in bats too. The reaction time.
And that would be the interesting test, absolutely, to do that comparative study. Absolutely. Yeah. I agree.
Maybe not pelicans.
Cross-species multitasking. Let's test
small birds. Birds that have like a lot of birds around them.
All right, everybody. This is This Week in Science. We are going to take a quick break, and we will come back after these messages for more stories with This Week in Science. Please stay tuned.
Explain the things you heard with more than intuition. The line of reason shows the way to go. No conclusion. The methods of hypothesis and patience are the only things I need. Put on a pair of goggles and go looking for the things I couldn't.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for watching This Week in Science. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us once again for more science and science-filled conversation, talking about the world around us. It always is so interesting. We're glad that you're here to be a part of it. So I would like to ask everyone to pre-order your Blair's Animal Corner This Week in Science 2018 calendars. We have them. Well, we don't have them yet. They are ready for your pre-order. So if you go to TWIS.org and then head over to the image on the right, there's an area that says pre-order your 2018 calendar. You can just click on that and it'll take you to the order page, and you can order, leave a note, give us your address. When we get them, we will send them to you and you will love it. It's a coloring calendar this year. So you get to color your own hypnotoad, as opposed to Blair deciding on the colors for you. So many wonderful animal corner months ahead. The calendars do also include science holidays, special days of the year that we should be aware of, things that we should all know about as we move through the year. It's a place where you can also keep track of TWIS on a weekly basis. From there, if you would like to go to our Zazzle store, head on over to the Zazzle store link. Click on that in the header bar. It will take you to the Zazzle store, where we have t-shirts and hats and lumbar pillows and all sorts of neat things with the TWIS logo all over it. If you'd like a TWIS logoed item or something with a picture from one of the past Blair's Animal Corner calendars. She's got all sorts of items through here. You can put one on your phone. You could have cards to send people. You can even buy stamps. Stamps for your Christmas cards or your Hanukkah cards. There's all sorts of things at our Zazzle store. Proceeds go to help TWIS keep going and to produce the show. If you do want to help produce the show in a financial way, be an executive producer, a financial sponsor, a patron, you can donate to TWIS. Click on that yellow donate button along the right sidebar. That'll take you through to a Patreon. That'll take you through to a PayPal page where you can donate using PayPal. Up at the top, if you click on the Patreon link, that will take you to our community page at Patreon, which is crowdfunding for artists like us creating shows. We are creating shows about science. And if you would like to help support us in this weekly endeavor, week in, week out throughout the year. You can pledge however much you are able on an ongoing basis from week to week to week to really help us keep producing this show and making it happen week after week after week. But if you are unable to help out in the financial way, you know, we can always use your help. Just getting the word out about TWIS, telling people about TWIS is half the battle, right? Getting a larger audience, growing the community of people. Let's get into that 17% of science interested people, active science compute consumers, and then beyond. I want to find people who didn't even know they wanted to know about this stuff. That's who I want. I want to talk to you guys. I want everybody here. I want a campfire. I do. I want my campfire to tell science stories around. So please help us get the word out. Tell people about our iTunes subscription possibilities. Tell them about our webpage, twis.org. Tell them about our YouTube account. Tell them about Facebook and how they can watch us every week on Facebook. Tell them whatever makes you happiest about us. Share your favorite TWIS story with someone this week. I hope that it helps because you help. We really could not do this without you. Thank you for your support.
The ramification of treatments from holy men leaves me slightly queasy deep down in the abdomen, convinced that the lives that they lead need adjusting. They drive to the bookstore and blindly start trusting the miracles and cures all laid down in black ink, never even bothering to stop and think.
And we are back with more This Week in Science.
Oh, yeah. I love coming back with more science. I mean, more This Week in Science, more. Justin, what you got?
Congratulations! You have just been assigned to raise the first genetically reconstructed Neanderthal baby. I'm sure you've got lots of questions about what to expect, but unfortunately, none of the off-the-shelf child development books are going to be of sure use to you. Because baby Neanderthals could grow up differently than modern human babies. Thankfully for you, a study led by Spanish National Research Council, researcher Antonio Rosas, has studied the fossil remains of a Neanderthal child's skeleton in order to establish differences between growth of Neanderthals and that of regular off-the-shelf human babies. According to the results of the article, which are published in Science, both species regulate their growth differently to adapt their energy consumption to their physical characteristics. Modern humans, this is Quotey Voice, modern humans and Neanderthals emerged from a common recent ancestor, and this is manifested in a similar overall growth pattern, explains Rosas. Applying pediatric growth assessment methods, this Neanderthal child is no different to a modern-day child. The pattern of vertebral maturation and brain growth, as well as energy constraints during development, they say, may have marked the anatomical shape of Neanderthals. So there's a little bit of the difference in the way that we're going, but overall, yeah, it's pretty much the same. Neanderthals, as we know, had a greater cranial capacity than the modern human, bigger heads, bigger brains. A Neanderthal adult had an intracranial volume of 1,520 cubic centimeters. A modern adult man has about 1,195 cubic centimeters. They got bigger brains. That of the Neanderthal child in the study was at 1,330 cubic centimeters before 8 years old. So before age 8, they already had a cranial capacity greater than a modern human adult. And at that age, the development of modern-day child's cranial capacity is pretty much fully completed as well. So it's about that of an adult. It's getting there. Developing a large brain involves significant energy expenditure, continuing Quotey Voice, and consequently, this hinders the growth of other body parts. In sapiens, modern humans that is, the development of the brain during childhood has a high energetic cost, and as a result, the development of the rest of the body slows down. Cost in terms of energy of anatomical growth of modern brain is usually high, especially during breastfeeding and during infancy. This seems to require slowing down of body growth. Although babies grow pretty quickly, I guess it's, comparative to other mammals, animals, creatures on the planet, it's kind of a slow transition into the adulthood for humans. The growth and development of the juvenile Neanderthal matches that of the typical characteristics of human ontogeny.
Ontogeny.
Where there's slow anatomical growth between the weaning and puberty, which could also be compensating for the immense energy cost of developing the large brain in the Neanderthal. In fact, the skeleton and dentition of this Neanderthal present a physiology which is similar to that of humans of the same age, except, this is very interesting, the thorax area, which corresponds to a child between 5 and 6 years that is less developed. So their whole thorax, that middle part, slower. The growth of our Neanderthal child, however, was not complete, probably due to energy savings. So while the human child had more thorax, Neanderthal's not done growing. The divergent aspect in the growth of both species is the moment of maturation of the vertebral column. And all hominids, the cartilaginous joints of the middle thoracic vertebrae and the atlas are the last to fuse. In the Neanderthal, fusion occurred about 2 years later than modern humans. So the delay of this fusion in the vertebral column may indicate that Neanderthals had a decoupling of certain aspects of the transition from infancy to juvenile phase. Although the implications are unknown, the feature could be related to the characteristic enlarged shape of the Neanderthal torso. So, growing their upper bodies longer than a typical human, or faster later, or it forms later, I guess.
So they're
trade-off growing the brain first.
Yeah, they're growing the brain. They're getting ready to do stuff, but then and there was a lot of maturation that was early compared to humans, but then there was other stuff that took a little bit longer. And there is definitely that we see this evolutionarily, this trade-off between energy for the brain versus energy for other things, because the brain loves energy.
Oh yeah,
it wants to suck it all up.
And yeah, it's a heavy energy load, not just in the development, but in the maintenance of such a big brain, which kind of indicates that hominids in general throughout time really relied a lot on their brain to survive. Otherwise, it would have been.
Yeah, that's a good take-home message.
We really hominids. We need our brains more so than other animals. Without it, we're kind of soft and fleshy. Don't have a lot of like natural weapons at our disposal. No claws, no sharp teeth.
Speak for yourself.
I wonder though, with the Neanderthal brain, given that it's a large brain that grew rapidly, developed more rapidly than the human brain from the outset. I wonder what that would mean for something like education. We have certain developmental milestones that take place, and it's like, oh, kids are going to start talking at about this age, and then they're going to start walking at this age, and then they're going to start, there are milestones. We know the approximate ages where these things take place. And so it'd be so interesting that developing Neanderthal adolescent, these mental, psychological, cognitive milestones would very likely be earlier.
Yeah. And actually correct. Thanks. Yeah. And in this example, by looking at the teeth, the wear on the teeth that and it was 7.5-year-old Neanderthal in this study, 3.5 feet tall, 57 pounds.
Sounds about
right. But they
right.
could already see wear in the teeth that was using teeth as that sort of third handle for skins and plant fibers, and was already at work. And if you and likely was likely was probably, my guess would be walking sooner, running sooner. Probably a little bit of the trade-off there is also going to be more physical. Kids can sort of develop more verbally first or more physically first. I would bet, again, speculating that the Neanderthals children were probably a lot more athletic sooner because they're with a group of, they live amongst a group of nomadic hunters who follow game around. So it's get up and run. Come on.
Yep.
In a Neanderthal family.
As close to, you know, the deer. Like we're not a deer on the plane falling out of mom and then running an hour later, you know, walking and running. Same
I did
day.
just have like a haunting image of a baby, like full on baby, speaking in complete sentences. You know, like look who's talking now sort of thing.
Could have been. We don't know.
It's pretty creepy.
Hey mom.
Yeah.
Hey mom. Pass me that skin over there. I'm gonna help. I'm gonna get at it. Can you pass me that jerky? I'd like some jerky, mom.
Mom, can you change
though,
me? Mom, time to go. Mom, went boom boom. Thanks.
That actually sounds like my children, like almost immediately. But I bet you the Neanderthal probably like spoke much later than a modern human did, because again, there's usually, if you have child development, usually kind of takes off in one of those directions or the other first. I know, but we're pretty darn similar, right? So and now we know that they develop physically kind of similar, but the brain usually goes off in one direction or the other first. Either you have a kid that walks early and does all that, but might not talk till a little bit later than the other child who talked right away but was walking much later. And I would bet just because it was required environment in the society that they were all being born into over hundreds of thousands of years.
More talking. No, less talking, more walking.
Right away.
Yeah, less talking, more walking. That's what it was. New research out of Brandeis University. Researchers in the lab of John Lissman have been working on trying to find the holy grail of memory. And you want to know what the holy grail of memory is?
Yeah.
Only the penitent man shall pass.
No. So in the neuron, you've got in your brain neurons that are responsible for your memories, right? And these memories last sometimes for your entire life. You learn how to ride a bike, right? What's the old adage? Never forget how to ride a bike, right? You're always going to know how to do this. How do you always know how to do it? Because within the neurons that are responsible, we haven't been able to find molecular structures that actually stick around in perpetuity, because it's constant cell metabolism. Things are getting broken down. They're there to help make a memory maybe, but then a week later, they're gone. So what is it that actually maintains a memory throughout your life? And this is a huge question in research. And for years, people have had battling hypotheses about what molecules it might be or what aspects of the neurons themselves might be responsible. And there is a molecule that is in the synapses, the places where neurons butt up against each other and communicate with each other, sending their messages back and forth. There is a molecule called calcium calmodulin dependent protein kinase, or CAMK2. CAMK2 has been a target for years and years of question to try and find out exactly, is it responsible for formation of memories? And it turns out that, yeah, this molecule is very present and responsible in part for this process called long-term potentiation that changes how neurons act and makes them stronger in certain situations and strengthens what's called the trace of the memory in your brain. But these molecules get broken down. And so they're like, what is going on here? And so they did an experiment in mice, basically with this CAMK2 molecule and blocking the CAMK2 molecule to see what happened to memories. And they did find that when CAMK2 was not available, that memories went away. They disappeared. And so this is more evidence that this CAMK2 might be the molecule responsible for memory permanence. But how does it happen? What these researchers think happens is that the CAMK2 works as clusters of molecules. And so since it's not a single molecule, it's this cluster. And the clusters then can talk other clusters into doing their job. And so they can basically turn other clusters of CAMK2 molecules into themselves so that they can go off and die. And so there's a constant replacement of these CAMK2 molecules in the exact situation with the same responses over time. So even though the molecule itself that was there for the memory formation disappears, it pulls in another molecule and says, you're going to act like us. And then one of them goes off. And then someone's like, I got to get out of here. And they grab another CAMK2 molecule, pull it in, and another one runs off so it can be recycled. So in the end, the molecule is always the same, quote unquote, but it's been recycled multiple times and it allows your memory to stay in place.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so Lisman, the researcher, he says, clusters of the CAMK2 could recruit replacement molecules without losing their overall function. The clusters then would be long-lasting, even if their component molecules were constantly changing. The amazing thing about CAMK2 is that once you turn it on, it stays on more or less forever, which is pretty cool. So this could be the mechanism. It makes sense to me, but more research because we want to be sure. Because this could be, if you want to get rid of memories, eternal sunshine of the spotless mind kind of thing, CAMK2 could potentially be the target.
What about the other way? What about preventing memory loss?
So this is another interesting question because CAMK2 is implicated in many neurodegenerative disorders that do affect memory, like Alzheimer's. And so this is a target then for the other direction of memory maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. So it's pretty cool. I thought this was very interesting, although I'm brainy like that,
I just love how many elements of our everyday life we still have so little idea about. We don't understand why we sleep. We don't know how memories work.
Where does the memory go, right?
We don't know why we hiccup, which we've talked about on the show before. And we don't know why we get pruny in the bathtub sometimes, but not other times.
And that's because we also don't understand the secret life of fingers.
But I'm not done yet, but okay, go ahead. Fingers it is. Go ahead.
It was a transition.
It was a transition. Go on with your bad fingers.
Fingers, if you are human, there's a good chance you have them. But do you know what they're doing when you are not looking?
I think so.
Yeah, I feel like I have a pretty good idea.
Scientists with more curious minds than yourselves wanted to know what their fingers were doing when they weren't looking. These are researchers from the University of Birmingham, Sorbonne Universitas, and Unilever Research and Development at Port Sunlight have found that human fingertips behave differently when touching something, depending on the type of surface that they touch. In their paper published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, the group describes experiments they conducted with volunteers and high-speed cameras. And here's what they found. Using our hands and fingers comes naturally, mostly, to most people. We don't really have to think about them, just utilize them to grasp, poke, swipe, focusing more on what we are trying to achieve rather than how it comes about. This is because our fingers do have some degree of autonomy. We just sort of don't have to be focused on it. They just kind of do it. We tell it to pick that up, and then they go and grasp. And they kind of do it without us having to think about where each individual finger will be placed as we do this action. Fingertips, they found, react automatically when we touch something as well. To learn more about how our fingertips work, the researchers asked volunteers to touch and press different objects while the researchers filmed the action with the high-speed camera. They discovered that our fingertips secrete a very small amount of sweat when we touch something hard and smooth, like a pane of glass. The skin on our fingertips is rather hard in its natural state, but when we touch something, like the screen of a smartphone, the nerves in the fingers sense that hardness, and sweat is produced. That sweat is then absorbed into the skin, softening it slightly. This allows the hills of our fingerprints to yield to pressure, flattening a little, allowing more surface area contact. The whole process helps to handle hard surfaces in desirable ways, like holding onto a glass of water, which would otherwise slip from our grasp. But the team also found that it does not happen instantaneously. It took up to 20 seconds for the skin to actually soften, depending on factors such as the hardness of the material and some of the differences between the individuals in the study. In contrast, researchers found that when a fingertip comes in contact with something like rubber, the flexibility of that surface conformed to the fingertips, reaching down into the valleys of the print. Thus, no softening of the skin was required and no sweat was produced. So
That's cool. So fingertips kind of like Blair was alluding to in the bath when we're in water and we end up with the pruny fingers. This is all part of the way that our fingertips just the nerves in them change the properties of our fingertips in response to the world around us, for touching, for feeling, for better sensation. Maybe this is from when we lived in the caves. And it was dark.
Query then. If a person happened to have nerve damage in one of their hands, I wonder if this response would
goes
be
away.
affected.
Probably.
So the pruny thing goes away.
Yeah,
so I
we
would
know the
expect
pruny
these
thing
would
does.
probably go away too. Yeah.
So, because I drop things a lot from my hand that has nerve damage. So that might be, I mean, part of it is that I'm just not grasping things tight enough.
But maybe you don't know that you should be grasping it more tightly because you're not feeling it correctly.
Right.
It's not your grasp, it's your feeling.
Yes. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff.
It's also interesting that this is a process that these nerves are making decisions based on the surface that they're in contact with, that we're not aware our body's making these decisions.
We don't need to be aware of so many decisions that our body makes all the time.
Right.
Autonomic processes, unconscious processes. We don't
Breathe
need
in.
to know.
Breathe out.
So right. So we can just breathe without
out.
thinking about it, but then we can also focus on it and breathe.
Mhm.
But you know, there's certain systems that obviously we don't sweat from my fingers. And actually, if anything, I'd want to train my fingers not to sweat. That way I could
Better for handshakes.
Well, no, just then my smartphone would be less greasy, right? Is that where that comes from?
Maybe, probably the oil on your fingers, but sweat
Oil
is
on your
also
touching a glassy surface?
Yeah, but the sweat is also antibacterial, so that might.
There you go.
Let me see your
Just
finger
sweat
sweat, finger sweat. I need a song. Somebody. Had a neuron chip lately?
Yum.
Huh?
Yeah, no, it's not like apple chips or banana chips, or it's not a nice and yummy, tasty snack, but it is something that could potentially lead to computer chips that act like neurons. Yeah, researchers are looking to create what's called a neuromorphic computing architecture to mimic how the brain works at its synaptic level. So there's always the analogy between how how a computer works and the human brain works, which it doesn't really, it's not a good analogy because the human brain has a lot of parallel processing going on all the time, multiple ports with lots of differential activation and inactivation through synapses, the strengthening of hundreds of thousands of synapses in a neural network. And to be able to get to the point where we can actually maybe talk about computers and brains in a truly analogous way, we need to make the chips, the hardware, more like a synapse. So researchers publishing this week in Science Advances, they report on their new architecture that uses purely optical means. They're using the optical domain via a photonic integrated circuit approach. And this optical means will allow things to move at the speed of light with virtually unlimited bandwidth and no electrical interconnect power losses. And so their synapse, it uses phase change material that changes phase when it's activated by light, by photons, combined with integrated silicon nitride waveguides. And they've been able to model certain aspects of the synapses themselves by setting synaptic weight, by varying the number of optical impulses that get sent down a waveguide. And this could potentially lead to an approach that might hearken non-biological synapses and computers that act and learn much more like the human brain. Because we want that.
No.
Blair's fears. No.
Hard pass. Although that would make it easier for me to upload my personality onto a chip and then live forever. So these are kind of battling concerns for me, is my desire to live forever and my fear of robot domination. They're kind of at odds.
They should be, and we should always have these combative relationships within ourselves and the conversations we have about the world.
Still
Because
don't understand why we would want to create an artificial intelligence that could think like us. Isn't that just asking for more of the same?
But we don't always have to make them think like us. Sometimes we just want to have them use nunchucks like us.
Huh?
Yeah, researchers are testing a new method of training robots and learning like people using an intuitive learning model where the robot actually has a hand that can be controlled by a glove on a human hand, which is pretty cool. But it can also just be on a robotic arm, and it can learn from being trained by a demonstrator. And so they had a human demonstrator actually use the nunchucks in front of the robot and teach this robot arm with a hand on it how to use nunchucks. And so it's thought that if a robot can use nunchucks, it might be able to do other complex tasks.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Teach the robots weapon skills for sure.
And even though this is just one thing that they've done, it could be that the AI takeover is so quick that this is the only thing in the future robot overlords arsenal, so that they're like, we will defeat all humans using nunchucks. It's all we had time to learn. Thank you for teaching us this.
That's all we had time to learn.
Now's our chance.
We now have weapons. Now we can fight back.
We like it when the robots can fight back. Should I move on to? Am I the only one with stories from here on out? Oh, Justin's got one. Justin's got one more.
Oh, I got two more.
Oh, two more. Okay, let me do this one. Old life. Researchers have discovered potentially the oldest evidence of the oldest life on Earth?
What?
Yeah, so researchers looking at some rocks in the Labrador area of Canada. On the coast, there are really old rocks, really far north in Canada, along that eastern coast. There's some very, very old rocks. And there's a rock formation called the Saglek Block. And some researchers from the University of Tokyo went there and have been looking at samples of the rock from the Saglek Block. And they found evidence of graphite within the rock that has a very has a carbon isotope balance that if it is indicative of processes that were once alive as opposed to inorganic. So carbon isotopes are very important for determining life processes, and there are certain processes that take place, and they use carbon-12 isotopes more readily. Carbon-12 likes to be turned into carbohydrates, and it likes to be turned into things that life uses. Another carbon isotope, carbon-13, not so much, but it ends up in a lot of rocks and stuff. And so to determine rocks that may have once harbored microbes, they look for isotope ratios that are more predominantly carbon-12, right? So they looked at these rocks, and that's what they found. And there's the question, okay, these are metamorphic rocks. They probably formed during a very melty period of the Earth's history. And what was going on? So maybe they got other rocks from another place blended in and melted with them. And looking at the crystalline structure of the rocks, they're pretty certain that this graphite is the graphite that they think from almost 4 billion years ago, 3.95 billion years ago. Now, the oldest little tiny chunk of graphite that's ever been found was in like a piece of amber, and it's supposed to be 4.1 billion years old, but it was completely isolated from any other environmental evidence anywhere nearby. So they can't actually say that that one little piece of graphite that was 4.1 billion years old actually is life from 4.1 billion years ago. But this 3.95-ish billion year old graphite is potentially evidence of microbes going way back.
Huh. Nice.
Yeah. Thanks, Canada. I like old rocks from Canada. Nice. Yeah. What do you have there, Justin?
Euromis vica, new species found in the Solomon Islands. According to postdoctoral researcher at the Field Museum in Chicago, who is the lead author of a Journal of Mammalogy paper announcing this rat's discovery, he says, "It's a big giant rat."
Ha! It's big enough to maybe crack coconuts, I've heard.
That's what it does. It can crack open a coconut. It lives in the trees.
And eats coconuts.
8 inches long.
It's a big rat.
And it was not discovered. Well, it was discovered a while, but it was just the locals already had a name for it. So it wasn't discovered. Oh no, 18 Kiki. Way out there. Keep going. 18
inches. That's more than that's more
it's
than
huge. It's a big giant rat. That's what the mammalogy expert says.
It's a big giant rat. Something that's interesting about this story too is that the locals, I guess, had been telling people, researchers, about the giant rat for like 20 years, and no one believed them.
Yeah.
Or well, they're elusive, I guess. They're. I mean, you. It's not that you necessarily don't believe. It's just you can't. You gotta find one to prove it, right?
Climb some trees, people.
Well, yeah, it's also a tree-dwelling rat, so they're probably like, it's probably just like a possum or something. It's fine.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But no, it's a giant rat.
Yeah.
Yeah. They live in 30-foot tall trees and don't come down too often. So they actually discovered this one because a tree that had one fell. And that's how it got discovered. It was on the ground. So.
Otherwise.
Well done, researchers.
Yeah. Finally.
Good hard work there, researchers. Good job. You really climbed those trees. No, you didn't.
And my other last news of the day, James Dyson, famous for creating a vacuum cleaner that didn't have a bag, bagless vacuum cleaner inventor, who holds apparently more than 10,000 patents, his company at least, for all sorts of products, is claiming he's 2 years into an electric car that he's expecting to be launched in 2020. So we have another
suction of some sort, I'm assuming.
Well, they will also clean the roads as it drives. Well, no, so there's a little backstory to this. I guess he had pitched to automotive industry and to government industries or government bodies a device that would help remove carbons emitting from tailpipes, and didn't get any traction with it. So, went away from that many years ago. So the idea of combating smog has been something that he has been focused on or had his mind wrapped around at times in the past. So in this case, he's decided, I'll just make a car that doesn't pollute while it drives. Right.
Cool.
And there's a couple things in here that scare me a little bit for him. They're going to try. He says his company is going to develop and create and produce and be in charge of every single component on this vehicle. Will be in-house.
Right.
Which that terrifies. I mean, Tesla largely did that, but he's not just coupling with another automaker to do this. It's going to Tesla.
He's created a battery company to do this. He's like making a whole system, an ecosystem.
There's so many components. And knowing a bit about the auto industry, nobody creates all the components. So, I mean, every car, wherever it's made, a lot of the components are coming from far-flung places and other, we saw this recently. There was an airbag recall. That same airbag recall affected many manufacturers because they all had the same source for that component.
Right. And and so you have a lot of that kind of stuff where like multiple manufacturers will use the same chassis, they'll use the same platform for building, or yeah.
So yeah, that seems a little daunting to try to start an entire car company from scratch with every component. But here's we've seen
Fisker do it. They went out of business and then came back again. Tesla hasn't gone out of business. They're doing okay. I think it's going to be by doing all those components themselves. This is going to be a very expensive car.
It's going to be expensive.
It's going to be like the Dyson vacuum cleaners that not everybody buys because they're expensive.
They weren't that expensive. Yeah, compared to a high-end vacuum cleaner, they were cheap.
Oh, what? Okay. But let me say, though, to your point, Kiki,
to a TriStar or a Kirby, a real high-end bagless, there are already bagless vacuum cleaners on the market, by the way.
Justin used to sell vacuum cleaners, so he's not the person to argue this with.
For a high-end vacuum cleaner.
So
the little plastic thing that you bought off the shelf in a box that had a fan first and went clink every time you went over a penny. Yeah, okay, there's a difference. But vacuum cleaners aren't designed based on how much carpet you have. It's about how effective they are about removing dirt from your carpet or floor. Anyway, that said, my favorite thing about this story is actually the comments that he makes recently about this. This is quotey voice. This is quotey voice for Dyson. I really embrace failure. You learn nothing by success, but failure is exciting because something has gone wrong and you've had a real visceral experience. So I like it and you learn from it. What happens is okay. What happens is you work on a problem and you stumble across a solution. You can never calculate it or sit at a desk and work out a solution. You have to build a prototype and watch it fail and then overcome the failure. I think that's a fantastic way about doing things. Apparently, before he came up with this vacuum cleaner, he had created 1,000 versions of it. I think he may have inflated that, but still, that's an inventor going out, building things, learning.
I love it. Be an inventor, build things, try, and I hope he does try. We need more more cars in the electric space. We need more competition. We need more good vehicles for people that are options. Hopefully he can make one that works well, that is cheaper, that more people can afford. That's my hope.
By the way,
I'm not counting on it though.
By the way, can I tell you something?
But yeah, I don't finish.
Can I say something real quick? I have to make an admission here of awareness of where we are in time and space. This vehicle is due to be launched in 2020. And in my head, we'll have to wait a really long time to see that. By gosh, that's so far off into the future.
Nope.
And I'm like, oh, wait. That's like
2 years.
A couple of years from now.
2 years.
2 years.
Oh my gosh. 2020. The future is tomorrow. Wow.
The future is already
So,
here.
The one thing I did want to say about the kind of very ambitious decision to try to do everything in-house is that the car was based on this combustion engine. And so one of the reasons I think that Tesla has been so successful is that they have decided to kind of remake how you think about your car in a lot of ways. They're trying to start from scratch for a lot of things because you can't get a car like we're used to without a combustion engine. It's not going to be the same. And so doing something, starting from scratch, making sure you're eliminating all unnecessary weight, changing your aerodynamics, changing all of these things from the bottom up is going to make it more achievable, I think. And so even though, yes, it's an insane thing to try to do, we need inventors who are willing to try insane things to fix some of these very complex problems, because us Americans
any longer
are not giving up our cars.
No, it's
so
not
we
a
need to
car.
find
You're getting
something,
an electric vehicle.
Yeah, you need to find something to replace it. Yeah.
And on that note, too, the auto industry itself has electric cars, but and very nice cars and everything else, but none of them have near the range. So this upstart who's reinventing the car and starting from scratch and doomed to fail
fix it.
actually has.
Fix it.
Wait, what are you saying?
Finish your statement.
Actually has a much. No, I'm not going to. Forget it.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on so we can finish the show before 10 o'clock p.m. Last couple of stories. Pluto has big ice knives. Big knives of ice. They're hundreds of feet tall in high altitude mountains. Blades of ice. Methane ice blades. And researchers from NASA's New Horizon mission have been looking at this and going, I wonder how those formed. Well, it turns out there's something of a climate on Pluto. And so there's changes that cause sublimation or melting, where it's like evaporation of the methane ice that goes directly into the very thin atmosphere. And so this sublimation is causing spiky ice knives to form. It's a very inhospitable region, the high altitudes near the equator of Pluto. Moving on, saber-tooth tiger kittens might have been cute, but they would have cut you.
So stabby at the end of the show.
Yes, I'm going to stab you. And it's the end of the show. We got to go. Saber-tooth kittens, these Smilodon kittens, very big fangs. Big fangs, yes. Researchers in PLOS this week report a study of postnatal limb bone allometry in felids from the Pleistocene of Rancho La Brea. So basically, they got bones from the La Brea tar pits and compared how they grew and how these little kittens developed compared to cats that we know of today. And those little kittens, they weren't cute little kittens. They had big front paws and they had big fangs and they were ready to grab prey. And so they might have been cute, like, jaguar kittens or tiger kittens, but you needed to fear them. Fear the saber-tooth kittens. Yeah. And that does it. We're done with our stories for the night. I'd like to say we're done with the show. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you. I'd like to give shout outs to everyone in the chat room. You guys are fantastic. Thank you so much to Fada for helping us with our social media efforts, Identity4 for recording the show, and Brandon for simulcasting us into the Facebooks from YouTube. Then I would like to say thank you to our Patreon sponsors, of which we have so many, and the numbers are growing and the names on the list are growing, and I hope to have a new list for you very soon as of this next month. So thank you to, if this actually goes, because sometimes it tells me it's not going to happen. That's what's going to happen right now, isn't it? Yep, an error occurred because it hates me. There we go. Let's try that again. Here we go. Ta-da! Thank you to Paul Disney, G. Burton Lattimore, John Ratnaswamy, Richard Onimus, Byron Lee, E.O., Kevin Parachan, Jacqueline Boyster, Tyron Fong, Andy Groh, Keith Corsell, Jake Jones, Gerald Sorrells, Chris Clark, Richard Hendricks, Charlene Henry, Brian Hendrick, John Gridley, Steve Bickle, Kevin Railsback, Ulysses Adkins, Dave Friedel, James Randall, Bob Calder, Mark Masaros, Edward Dyer, Trainer 84, Layla Marshall Clark, Larry Garcia, Randy Mazuka, Tony Steele, Gerald Onago, Steve DeBell, Louis Smith, The Harden Family, Ive Schmun, Greth Guthman, Patrick Cohn, Ksenia Volkova, Daryl Haroon, Sarang, Lex Wilson, Jason Schneiderman, Dave Neighbor, Jason Dozier, Matthew Wilton, Eric Knapp, Jason Roberts, Richard Porter, Rodney, David Wiley, Robert Aston, Sir Fickanelic, Christopher Rappin, Dana Pearson, Paul Stanton, David Brendan Minish, Dale Bryant, Todd Northcutt, Arlene Moss, Bill Kersey, Ben Rothig, Darwin Hannon, Rudy Garcia, Felix Alvarez, Brian Hohn, Orly Radio, Brian Condren, Mark, Nathan Greco, Hexator, Mitch Neves, Flying Out, John Crocker, Christopher Dreyer, Artyom Shuwata, Dave Wilkinson, Steve Mashinsky, Rick Ramus, Gary Swinsberg, Dale Veldendo, Paxton Howard, Salgood, Sam Maxeter, Emma Grenier, Philip Shane, James Dobson, Kurt Larson, Stefan Insama, Honey Moss, Mountain Sloth, James Derpo, Jason Olds, James Paul West, Alex Doty, Illumina Lama, Joe Wheeler, Dougal Campbell, Craig Porter, Adam Mishkan, Aaron Luthen, Marjorie, David Simmerly, Tyler Harrison, Colombo Ahmed. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. And if anyone of you are interested in supporting us on Patreon, you can find information at patreon.com/thisweekinscience, or just head over to twist.org where there's a link to the Patreon stuff. And remember, you can help us out simply by telling your friends about TWIS. Tell them your favorite TWIS story this week and say, you can find out more by subscribing. We'll be back again on next week's show, broadcasting live, 8 p.m. Pacific time, here at twist.org/live. But if you don't make it here, it's okay. We are on the internets and you can find us if you go to our Facebook page, our YouTube page, or just twist.org.
Thank you for enjoying the show. TWIS is also available as a podcast. Just Google This Week in Science in your iTunes directory, or if you have a mobile type device, you can look for TWIS, the #4 Droid app in the Android marketplace, or simply This Week in Science in anything Apple marketplace-y.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes will be available on our website. That's at www.twist.org, where you can also make comments and start conversations with the hosts and other listeners.
Or you can contact us directly. Email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or Blair Baz at twist.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, somewhere in the subject line, or your email will be spam filtered into oblivion. You can also hit us up on the Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jackson Fly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover, or just a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to you tonight, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you learned anything from the show, please remember,
It's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. This week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news, that what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just better understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. Jeopardy. And this week in science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got a laundry list of items I want to address. From stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say. And if you learned anything from the words that we said, then please just remember it's all in your head. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.
And the show's over now. The show's over now. Fast and stabby end of the show is over now. Everybody go to bed.
Here, here.
Tell your friends. Show's over. Show's over, people.
Don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Stay here. Or in the famous words of Tracy Ullman, go home. Go home.
Indeed. For a second, I thought you said Tracy Chapman, and I was like, I'm not familiar with that one, Kiki.
Tracy Ullman. I don't know. You might be too young to remember her.
No, I know her for sure. That's where The Simpsons started. It's on the Tracy Ullman show.
It's true. That's where I first fell in love with Bart Simpson. Pam, I know it's 3 p.m. That sounds like nap time right there to me. 3 p.m.
I took a nap at 4:30 today.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh my.
It's been a long day.
Yeah. Getting up early?
Kind of. I just have a lot going on. Yeah.
A lot of work.
It's a hectic week.
I know how that goes. Sometimes in those hectic weeks, a nap is useful.
Yeah, and I usually naps and I do not get along, but this week, today, necessary.
Yeah, Pam, naps are for people without children. Well, no. If your child naps, you can nap with them.
Right. Just might be over real suddenly.
Yeah. Those wonderful, I remember those wonderful hour and a half long nap times when they were 3 times a day. That was the best. And then when the babies are really little, it's like they're right there with you all day long, all night long. But then you get like 3 during the day, 3 hour and a half long naps. That was amazing.
Oh my God. When are they awake? What even are babies?
But then your baby falls asleep on you and you're like, oh, if I put the baby down, I can't. What if the baby wakes up and then everything's messed up? And so then you sit there with the baby on you and you can't even, like, maybe you can't even reach your book. You can't reach the TV remote and you're just sitting there unable to clean the house until you just fall asleep. Yeah, exactly. Kids, when you nap, there's that question, do I nap with them now because I'm exhausted? Or is this when I do all the work? All the work, all the time, exactly. And then they stop napping. Right, and she's helping you, Pam. I know. Let me help you. Oh, okay. That helping is going to equal double the work for mom. That's what it's going to equal. No, twit refugee. No, my child's the worst sleeper ever. Even now, he's probably not going to stay asleep. He's asleep now, but he will not stay there.
And then on cue, Kai walks in behind you.
Hi, Mommy. Hi, Mommy. Can I be on the show? He really wants to be on the show. He doesn't understand why he can't be on the show.
Huh.
I keep having to explain to him that it's after his bedtime.
Well,
So
tell him to do some science news research.
I know. Do some research for me. He's so sweet though. He's like, but Mommy, what if they want me to be on the show?
Oh my goodness. He is playing a dangerous game.
I know. He's like, but Mommy, I know I already have fans. I know I
But-
have people who want me on the show with you.
But Kai, let me explain what an executive producer is.
Mhm. He's starting to ask. It's kind of fun. I'm kind of excited. I really have to get my studio downstairs set up. We have to get a space where we can really play at doing stuff because he really wants to do some video.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is he wants to do like Minecraft on This Week in Science. And I'm like, that's not this.
Mm-mm.
So if you want to work with me, he's like, I want to work with you. How can I work with you? I'm like, you have to do science. So I have to talk him into that.
Yeah. He's like, Minecraft is science.
I know, right? That's what he has to convince me of. If he's gonna be a good host producer type, he has to know how to pitch, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Kai is 6 now, Pam. Everybody wants more Kai. Okay, I'll go wake him up. I'll be right back.
Huh.
Ha 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 ha. Not.
I know, you didn't even take your headphones off. I was like, she's not going.
No, she's not going anywhere. Her headphones are still on her head. That's just I know. Well, at some point, maybe I will get him his own Twitch gaming setup. Right? We'll figure out. Oh, people will love Kai. It'll be great.
You guys guess where I went? And by you guys, I mean Kiki, because Justin's not here.
Where'd you go?
I went to the Bigfoot Discovery Museum.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I have to, here, let me read you
Bigfoot exists.
some of the things. Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I will read you some of the things that they had at the Bigfoot Discovery Museum.
I mean, maybe Bigfoot lives at the top of trees. And
So
You'd want to fall down with a Bigfoot in. It's like, oh, hey, look, we discovered Bigfoot.
we
So
just
they
weren't
had-
looking in the tops
We were
of the
never
trees.
looking up. That was the problem.
So they had nunchucks. Speaking of nunchucks, they had toy nunchucks in a display. It says Bigfoot Trade Object. This set of toy nunchucks was left under a deck in Boulder Creek about 4 years ago. The man was sitting in his hot tub at 2:00 a.m. when something banged up against it. The next morning, he found these neatly laid out under the tub. I told him that if he left some food in exchange, the Bigfoot might come back on a regular basis. He took my advice, leaving graham crackers, and soon he had 2 of them coming by almost nightly. To stop them from coming, he turned on exterior spotlights around the house at night. So, Bigfoots are real. That's what we learned.
Could have been raccoons.
No.
Could have been possums.
No, definitely not.
Could have been 18-inch long rats.
Nah, man. No way.
It was the chupacabra. The graham cracker eating chupacabras.
It was really interesting. I was waiting to buy my these were great. I was waiting to buy my souvenirs.
I love you and your souvenirs.
And I'll show them to you in a second. But he was the man whose Bigfoot Discovery Museum it was checking out this other guy. And they started having this really intense conversation about their experiences with Bigfoot. And I guess the lore is, which makes sense to a certain degree, that it's a species. It's not one individual. Like, I always thought it was one guy. It was this one Bigfoot that exists. But no, it's an entire species hiding in the forest. So there's like female Bigfoots.
Oh
there's
yeah, there's
baby
families.
Bigfoot. Yeah, absolutely. And the guy whose Bigfoot Discovery Museum it was, he took out a tooth and he started talking about this tooth and how it's so similar to this ancient large human ancestor tooth, but that it was a new tooth that he found out in the woods. And anyway, so I bought these 3 cards.
And a tooth.
I did not buy a tooth, but I bought this.
Oh, thanks, Big.
I bought this. This is my favorite one.
Aw.
And then this one.
Your Bigfoot and climate change. Oh my goodness.
I was like, I have to buy these now. Because it's true. If Bigfoot was real, he would care about global warming. It's true.
You know what he'd also care about? Logging and deforestation.
Well, there is that too.
And if he were around, he'd be like, don't mess up my forests, you.
Yeah, it's, I mean, but hey,
things.
maybe they're out there because there was an 18-inch rat we didn't know about. So, but it was so weird
that's
too.
rat versus
Because there were
Bigfoot.
different like representations of Bigfoot at this thing, and some of them were like 7 feet tall, and some of them were like 15 feet tall. They had a Bigfoot diorama, and yes, these things were probably 15 feet tall. So, not sure what that's about. Like, they need to figure out how big they actually think he is. Because that's a pretty big range in size.
Yeah, it's a huge range in size. I mean, well, a child Bigfoot is obviously not going to be as large as a fully grown Bigfoot. So 7 feet for a child, fully grown 15. Where on earth would a pregnant Bigfoot hide?
Great question. Or a dead, like, how come we've never found a dead one?
Dead Bigfoot, right?
That's the thing, is like, sure, fine, they're hiding real well, but when one dies or gets lost and dies or gets sick and dies, like, you'd find something.
I think so. Oh.
But it's fascinating that all these people really, truly believe.
Do they?
Yeah.
Do they? But do they?
Yes. Just like so many people really, truly believe that there's a flat earth. Just
Yeah.
Do they? But do they? But do they?
Unfortunately, yeah. No, yeah.
I don't know if they do. I'm hesitant to believe people's beliefs.
Yeah.
That people believe the things that they say they believe. I'm very hesitant to believe that.
Well, the owner of the Bigfoot Discovery Museum was having a very nice conversation when he was talking about the teeth. Later, they were talking about how people villainize the Bigfoot, and they say that Bigfoot is hurting people and that people are going missing because of the Bigfoot. And he goes, listen, they're just like us. I mean, there's good upstanding citizens, and then there's crazy people who hurt people. Bigfoot are just like that. There's bound to be some bad eggs out there that are going to hurt some people.
So yeah, but this guy also runs a Bigfoot store. Like, there's a point where you cannot have a change of heart.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Publicly.
I mean, he's had that store.
Publicly.
I think he said for 13 years.
Yeah.
And he lives in it. Like, he lives above the store.
Yeah. Right. So
his life is Bigfoot now.
Hugh Hefner died.
Oh.
again? Or is that...
It was just announced while we were doing the show.
Oh.
He's 91. He was 91.
Oh my goodness.
Hugh Hefner. He was an icon. Seriously,
Was.
you think about the 80s, he was an icon.
70s?
70s, 80s, yes. I don't know, the Playboy era. He certainly knew how to live life.
Who's
Good job.
who's
His son for a while now, and has reintroduced
Thank you.
nudie pictures, which had gone away. Became
Oh,
articles
really?
only. Oddly, subscriptions started to dry up. And his son took over and said, "Are going to put naked ladies back in Playboy."
Yeah, but unless they do an online subscription, I don't know.
Yeah,
Print media.
Yeah.
They make an app.
An app. I'm tired of apps.
Oh, see, Louie in the chat room knows what's up. Bigfoot keeps falling off of the flat Earth. That's why we can't find them. Fall off the edge. For sure.
For sure.
Strength,
Great
I
thing
like that.
about
First time I
America-
heard chupacabra, I thought the person mispronounced Chewbacca.
That's how you say
Great.
Chewbacca if you've got some big league chewing gum in your mouth at the same time.
Yeah.
Chupacabra. Ah. Yes. I have a phone call about the entomology conference that we're going to be at in Denver the beginning of November. Any Denverites out there will be there.
I'm very excited.
And we could
cannot
do a
wait,
meetup
because-
either Sunday evening or Monday evening, probably the what is it, the 4th and 5th of November?
I thought it was 5th and 6th.
Well, it could be 5th and 6th.
Yeah, I think so.
If I figure out how to use a calendar. There we go.
Because I took the 7th off of work.
5th and 6th. Here we go. Yes, Sunday the 5th, Monday the 6th. Denverites. Anyone out there?
I'm very excited because I of course I have a passionate love of linguistics, and being in an entire convention full of people who study the roots of where words come from.
I'll let you take that one, Kiki.
Nope. No.
I think it's gonna be I'm gonna be able to ask like anybody there, like, okay, where does this word come from? How did we end up with 2 words for this? And they'll be able to tell me the etymology of
Nope.
words.
Entomology.
What?
Okay, we're gonna not etymology, entomology.
Huh?
Entomology.
Wait, what are you saying? You're saying the same word over and over again. Not this, but the
Entomology.
same
It's
thing I
the
just said.
Greek. I'm reading it right now from Wikipedia.
Oh, I'm getting the
Entomon.
entomology.
Entomon, insect, and logia is a study of. It's a study of insects. Etymology, however, no N.
Oh.
Etymology, E-T-Y versus E-N-T-O. Etymology.
So is it possible that every time I've looked up a word to find out its
It's
origin
Latin.
and gotten referred to a page with a bunch of pictures of insects, it was so not all of our language comes from describing insects then.
Nope.
Oh, no. Insects are the
That's-
first ones to come up with the alphabet. For sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
It was written on the backs of
It kinda
scarab
felt like that, 'cause,
beetles.
like every time I'd be like, what's the entomology of? And then I would get like some insects study.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, we derived our entire language based on insects, on studying insects. That's very true. Then my total understanding of linguistics that I'm very passionate about has been for naught. I'll just say.
You're funny.
I am
Etymology.
hoping that I
Etymon.
can find.
What?
Oh no, it's gone. Remember those like macro images of the jumping spiders that I love?
Yeah.
Yeah, the website's down. But I'm hoping there's some really adorable close-ups of jumping spiders that I can buy.
That would be cool.
There might be. Do you think that anyone will want to see my impression of a peacock spider dance there?
At the etymology conference? Yes. The entomology conference. They might. Probably. Maybe we can get people up on stage to do a peacock spider conga line.
You know what I say to that?
You say it so loudly. So loudly. Oh, story that I wanted to talk about that we didn't get to talk about. Did you hear the story about the little tiny orange frogs who can't hear themselves?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Wait, what?
yes.
I did.
Did they make themselves deaf over generations of being loud?
Basically.
Basically, they're tiny and they have underdeveloped ears and they can't hear themselves. They can't hear themselves and they can't hear others. So if it's a female listening for a male, they can't hear them either. So the males are calling on deaf ears.
Right.
Yeah.
So they signal in new ways, right? Don't they do visual signals now?
So this is the hypothesis that's put forward by the researchers. But what I was wondering, I know the frogs don't have hairs and they're not on webs, but they are maybe on leaf litter, on other vibrational surfaces. And is it possible? I didn't see in the study or what we were looking at, I didn't see that there was no behavioral response to the song.
Oh, interesting.
So
I like where you're going.
I want them to look at things in the way that they've been looking at the spiders, because spiders hear without ears.
Yes, you're so right. And, that's the thing, too, is that, like, water, sound waves can create ripples in water.
Yeah.
So if they're in or around a body of water as well, that could be transferred.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting. Kiki, I like the way you're thinking.
I need to talk to them about what their next research studies should be, right?
Yeah.
Get to work, people.
I think that's a segment that we could have on the show. Not every week, but pretty often would be, let me tell you what your next experiment should be.
We know what you need to do next. We've figured this out.
What's next with Kiki? What's next with Dr. Kiki? What's next?
Good night, Fata. What is next?
Behavioral response to the calls? That's what's next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, they've hypothesized that it's visual. And it could be. I mean, they're bright orange, but I mean, they'd really have to be super close to each other.
Right. And how do you tell all of the bright orange ones apart? Right. So like there's that. And then also it'd be very easy to turn out the lights or to put a visual divide between them and see if they still respond.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sure these frogs are probably calling at night in the dark.
Yeah.
Isn't that what frogs do?
That is generally what they do.
So this whole visual idea, I'm like, oh, you guys are neuroscientists and not behavioral biologists, are you?
Yeah.
Come on.
So
That's
there
very
is
interesting because also they're all orange.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it's.
You're focusing on the wrong things. So one of the things is one of the loudest creatures on the planet is a frog by weight. Anyway,
Yeah.
it produces this super high decibel sound that should make it deaf, but its lungs are connected to its ears in such a way as when it makes the sound, it sends an opposite pulse against the eardrum so it doesn't rupture itself. Right. So even though it's super loud and should deafen itself, it doesn't because of this quirk of how it developed or this evolutionary overcoming of a thing. So what if this frog just didn't? This frog just figured out how to get louder and louder, and then at one point was destroying eardrums. So then why put energy into really producing good ears if you're just going to knock them out?
Yeah, but but somebody has to respond to the song.
Yeah,
And
like why would you put energy into producing song?
And they're saying that this is just we're seeing them at a stage of evolution where the song doesn't really matter anymore. And like that's the other hypothesis they have is beyond the visual signals, that they've evolved to a point where the the song doesn't matter anymore, but we're in the midst of we're catching them in the middle of this evolutionary process. They haven't gotten to their
So flash
next
forward
point yet.
I don't know,
That they don't use song to communicate during the mating season.
100 years, they won't even be talking.
They won't even, yeah, exactly. They won't be going.
And their ears will start to develop.
That's more of a squirrel sound, though, huh? That's what a squirrel sounds like.
It's more like
That's a pretty good squirrel.
Have you heard an angry squirrel though? Like there's sometimes I around here
Yeah,
we've got
they're
these little
terrifying.
squirrels and they're like,
yeah, I hate it. You gotta tell me, I friggin' hate it.
Your love. That's what I think, Ed. Vibrations, but not picked up by the ear by something else.
And maybe it's in a just, like, again, somebody looked at this, so I'm sure they checked, but maybe it's a frequency range thing.
No, their ears are not developed. And they checked how the ears are not able to respond
Right.
to the frequency range
ears.
that they're calling in.
Not ears. But if you have a low enough frequency, that's where you're going to feel that way. You're not going to feel it with the high pitched frequencies. Aren't going to get that vibration from afar.
It depends. I mean,
that
not from afar, you're right, but
It's
the
that low
frogs
end.
are not that far away from each other.
Yeah.
So that's
Feet away from each other.
So that's really the question. Is if they have another way of sensing the sound.
I'd be looking for low end frequency that's traveling maybe through the tree limb, through the pond, through the ground.
So the first step is to see if they are responding to the sound, period, behaviorally.
Right. Absolutely.
And after that, you can look at how it's being transferred and what element of it they're responding to and all these other things. But if they're not actually responding to the sound at all, then yeah, it's probably a vestigial trait that evolution will clean up at some point. But we can't know that for sure until we do a behavioral study on them.
Yeah.
So that's where behavior and physiology have to work together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Work together.
All right, my head's about to explode.
Don't have that happen. No exploding heads.
Terrible headache.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go drink some water.
Oh.
I'm going to go drink some water. I've been drinking water. I'm going to drink some more water. It's going to be great.
Hooray.
Maybe I'll drink some actual vodka. That'll be great too.
I'm just
Water in that
gonna
too.
go to sleep. That's what I'm gonna do.
I'm going to read a book.
All right, kids.
I'm
Good night.
into the second novel of the Expanse series, Caliban's War. Yes.
Oh.
Yes, it's very good.
All
All
right,
very
all right,
good
Blair.
stuff.
Say goodnight, Blair.
Good night, Blair. Say good night, Justin.
Good night, Justin.
Say good night, Kiki.
Good night, Kiki.
Good night, Kiki. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on This Week in Science once again. Join us again next week. We will be back. We do this. We come back. We do it. More peacock spider dancing from Blair. Probably. More science for sure.